now it's time to install the big boy, what is my personal favorite option part. We have an aluminum rear swing arm here for the Promoto-Mx. Machined solid piece of aluminum. This thing is a monster and it looks amazing on the bike. A little more complicated of an install than some of the things we've installed earlier in the video, but we're gonna go ahead and dive in, get this guy installed, and get ready to send it. All right, first thing is we're gonna pull the jersey up here on the rider, and we're gonna go ahead and pull the pin, the body clip pin out, and then the plastic pin that goes through the rider, we'll pull that out and flip the rider up. And then we have this locking piece here. We'll go 1/4 turn counterclockwise, pull it off. Thumbs underneath the boots and just kind of pop those up off the foot pegs. We'll set our rider figure off to the side. And then we're gonna go ahead and set the bike stand over here, lay the bike on its side. We're gonna pull this plastic panel and this one off, and then we're gonna pull this plastic cover off here on the side too. And it's these 5 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, pull this side cover off. Now we're gonna go over to the other side. And we need to actually pull off this transmission cover. So we're gonna pull off these 5 screws and pull this off. Set those off to the side, and then just grab the foot peg and kind of work this case off. Take the 2 pieces and set them over to the side there. You can see our transmission gears here. This gear is actually going to need to come out, and so is this one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bike on the stand real quick, and I'm going to grab my 7mm driver here and basically go through this gap right here under the motor, and that's where the slipper nut is. So we'll actually put the driver on the slipper nut, and I'm actually going to push against it. So I have the nut here on the slipper wrench, and it's attached to this shaft. And what I actually want to do is pop this guy out. So I'm actually going to kind of tap on the nut to pop out the slipper assembly. I'll set that off to the side. And then I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to remove the rear tire. So we have a pin screw here, 2.5, and we have an M7, or it's actually an M4 nut 7mm driver here on this side. So we'll take this rear axle out. Put the nut off to the side, go ahead and move this axle out. Push the tire forward, you'll loosen the tension on the chain, and then you can just pull it off. And you can pull the chain off the front sprocket too for this. So we'll just pull the chain all the way off the bike. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna hold this gear here. There's a pin screw in the sprocket here on the chain. So we're actually gonna grab our 2mm driver and just unthread this pin screw. And it threads into the plastic outer ring here, and then it's a pin after that, so it comes out pretty easy. And we're gonna go ahead and slide the sprocket off, and now we can basically push on this guy and pull this shaft out of the right side. Now, the rear swing arm basically mounts on this shaft, so when you pull it out, now the rear swing arm is basically disconnected in the bike. It's just connected to the suspension parts down here. So we're actually gonna pull this pin out right here. We'll grab a 1.5, and we'll take that cap screw out. That's basically just covering the pin. So we pulled that screw out, and then we'll push the pin out from the other side. So we actually knock that out. And then the shock is actually still through the middle of the swing arm. So to get it out, we actually need to pop the shock loose. So the shock upper mounting screw is right through this hole. And now the rear swing arm is off the bike. So you have your suspension and your shock kind of still sitting there. We'll move our bike off to the side. And now this is our rear swing arm assembly. We have our little brake caliper here. We have our chain guard, our chain tension, and then our bearings here. So go ahead and pull these steel bushings out. They're like lipped steel bushings that have a step on them. So you can see that the small step fits inside the bearing, and then the outer step basically acts as a spacer between the bearings and the side plate and the bearings in the swing arm. We'll just take our 2 mil and pop these bearings out real quick, leave them with the spacers, and then I'm going to take my 2 mil and I'm going to pop these aluminum chain tension inserts out. Set those off to the side. I'll take my 2 mil and remove the chain guide here. And a 1.5 for these M2.5 screws to remove the faux caliper. All right, so there's our stock composite swing arm, completely disassembled. Still has the stickers on it from the graphic. We could probably transfer those over to the aluminum swing arm if we want, but in my case, I think I'm just gonna leave it maximum bling, no stickers covering it up. So we can go ahead and move this guy off to the side. So now we're gonna basically go through all these parts, reinstall them on the swing arm. I'm gonna go ahead and start by installing the faux brake rotor here. These holes are through holes, so you're actually threading into the plastic, so no need for thread lock. So you just kind of run the screw through the hole and then you thread into the caliper. And I'll get one started and then I'll start the other one so it'll hold itself. And then with the swing arm, you get this little aluminum adapter bracket that basically picks up the rear chain guard, and you get a screw with it. So we're gonna go ahead and clean that screw because we're going steel into aluminum. We wanna use some thread lock, but we want the screw to be clean. We'll grab our M2 driver here. We'll go ahead and clean the screw. And you can see how much oil came off the screw. So it's always good to clean it before we apply the thread lock so that the thread lock actually sticks to the screw. Put a good drop on there. And then we will hold this adapter plate up to the swing arm and install this screw. And this is steel into aluminum, and you don't want this thing to come off ever, so just crank it down. It's basically, should never come off. And then we'll go ahead and install our chain guard. Now, same thing, we have these screws here. They're running through plastic but into aluminum. If you put the thread lock on the screw before you push it through the plastic, a lot of it will actually get pushed up. So I'm actually gonna put a small drop of this TLR thread lock just basically on the inside of the outside of the hole. The inside of the hole on the outside of the part, and just wipe anything that spilled off. And then I'll go ahead and install these guys. So I'll just get one started here. Then I'll get the other one started, and they'll locate the part, and then I'll tighten both of them down together. And same here, I get these pretty tight. I mean, you don't want to, completely squish the plastic, but you can go pretty snug on those. All right, so we got our chain guide and our faux brake on there. I'm going to insert the bearings here in the front now on each side. And then I'm going to go ahead and put these steel bushings in. So obviously they'll only fit in one way, but you kind of insert them into the bearings, and then all that you really see is like a little spacer on the edge there. Now we'll grab our bike. Time to get the rear swing arm started to assemble on the bike. So same as before, we got to fit the shock kind of through the suspension here. Okay, and then we'll basically slide the swing arm here to line up with the hole here for the swing shaft. And when we get that aligned, we will take our swing shaft with the gear here and start it on the right side, like so. And we will install it through the bushings, through the bearings, when we get it aligned there. And it'll run all the way through the chassis to the other side and out. All right, So we have that swing shaft through. I'm gonna go ahead and hook up the suspension first thing. So I'll just compress the shock and kind of get it up towards its mount. And then we have our hinge pin here that needs to install. But now with the aluminum swing arm, it's not a hinge pin, it's a second long pin screw. This one we're gonna clean also. So we'll do some of our MagnaForce onto the rag, 2 mil, clean it off, and then we'll add some TLR lock, thread lock. And we'll basically thread, or basically go through this hole to the other side, and then it'll thread into the far side of the part. So if you are using the aluminum swing arm, this pin screw will replace the hinge pin. So if you do get the titanium hinge pin set, you will only actually be using it up here. You won't be using it in the rear with the aluminum swing arm only. All right, so we got our pin in here. I'm gonna locate the shock. Like I mentioned before, you kind of use my fingers to make sure that the shock is flat so that it slides up into its mount pretty easily, get it centered. And then I actually cycle the suspension up, and it helps locate the shock in its area. And we'll grab the screw here and install it. All right, so we got our rear suspension coming together here. And I'm gonna go ahead and install the front sprocket. You have a pinhole here in the end of this lay shaft, and you just wanna make sure that it aligns with the pinhole here in the sprocket for the screw. So I go ahead and slide it over when it's aligned, and then you'll take your pin screw here, and the pin goes in first, and the threads go in last. And basically the threads just sit right up there to the edge of the plastic part, and you use your 2 mil driver and just run the threads in. The plastic is on there to basically hold the threads so that it doesn't fall out. And now you have your lay shaft run through, so we're all set there. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and reinstall the rear tire and chain. So we're gonna go ahead and put our 1/2 mil forward inserts, aluminum inserts in here, and we'll install these aluminum spacers on the outside. Now the chain, what we'll do is we'll run the chain through the arm like this, around the front sprocket. We'll pull the chain up on the lower chain guide here, and then set it on top of the rear arm there. We'll grab our rear axle, and we'll basically slide it up and through. And we'll actually push it a little bit further forward, and then we will run the chain here around the outside of the sprocket and on, and then we'll pull the tire back till everything aligns and pull the chain tension a little bit tighter. And there we go. One thing I'll mention is that with the aluminum swing arm, because the part is so long compared to the plastic one, there could be a slight variation in the length from here to here, and you might need a slightly different chain tension. This one seems to be correct. A little on the snug side, but the chain will break in quickly. So I'm gonna leave it like this, but just keep note of your chain tension as you're swapping between these parts. All right, so back over to the other side here, we have our transmission, our lower gear, our pinion gear, then we have our slipper assembly. So we're just gonna go ahead and slide this guy in, make sure that the gears align, and then once the gears are lined up, you just kind of firmly press this in, and it kind of will snap into place. And then we'll take our gear cover here and install that. And we have the 2 parts of the gear cover. So you don't have to install them together, but you can't install the upper part of the gearbox here with this fender on, unless you install them at the same time. So I'll just install them like this. And these are all M3x10 flathead screws with a 2 millimeter driver. These screws don't need to be crazy tight. I just get them snug. And then we'll go back over to the left side. I'm actually gonna go off the stand here. So now we gotta put the plastic cover back on this side. But before I do, I'm just gonna put this rear fender on. It'll be a little bit easier to see. There's a pinhole on this side and a pin on the right side. So basically you locate those, and then this goes into a groove in the top behind the shock, and then this pin slides in this slot and the screw goes through this hole. We're not gonna put the screw in yet because that screw goes through the plastic cover, but you can kind of see how this mud guard fits in here, here, and in the top. And if it's misaligned, if you miss the groove in the top, just so you know, it'll look something like this, where you have a ton of angle in that mud guard. You didn't find the groove correctly with that top part slotting in. So you can kind of feel it out, and there you have almost a straight up and down kind of angle there. All right, so we'll take our left side cover and place that back on. And we got 5 screws here. All the flatheads, there's 4 flatheads, they're all the same length. So no need to stress about getting those messed up or misaligned. And then the last one is a button head, and it has the cap for the lean bar spring here. And we'll get that aligned. We just want to make sure that the cap fits over the spring correctly and that everything is lined up well. All right, put it back on the stand, and we'll put our plastic panels back on. All right, we'll grab our rider legs and go ahead and slide them over. Just put thumb underneath the foot pegs, pull them down. We have our lock piece here. I'll pull the jersey forward to make sure that we don't pinch that. And then slide this lock piece over, and at 1/8 turn clockwise, we'll lock it in. Slide the rider down, push this plastic pin from the back through, and then we will put the pin through the hole. And then I always rotate it down so the angle bend is towards the body. And pull it over there and so you don't see any of it. And man, oh man, look at that aluminum swing arm on this bad boy. That thing looks awesome. Looks so real. I can't wait to get one of those for myself, put it on my bike. One little note I'll add is that when you're done, you are gonna have an extra hinge pin and an extra 2.5 button head screw. Those parts were replaced with that long pin screw in the rear swing arm assembly. So don't be concerned that you have these parts left over. You actually should. So aluminum swing arm, we got it on the bike. It's looking awesome, and we're gonna go send it now.